Hey guys. Tonight we start with some things that might sound a bit odd for bedtime. Your own personal seat of honor, right beside royalty, in a tiny, echoing chamber that smells faintly of lavender and pine. You trudge down a dimly lit corridor of Windsor Castle, your boots muffled by thick tapestries, and you can almost feel the hush as you approach a heavy oak door carved with the king's crest. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, why not drop your location and local time in the comments? Let me know where in the world you're tuning in from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's step into the story. You find yourself in a small chamber lined with scented oils and polished wood. The centerpiece is a stout wooden stool, its grain worn smooth by generations of royal relief. This is your office, the privy. Here, you become the groom of the stool, a title that sounds ridiculous until you realize it's the highest honor for an attendant in Henry VIII court. You're not just emptying the royal bowels, you're listening to secrets, delivering counsel, and wielding influence as subtly as the stool's hidden drawer for love tokens. From afar, the idea seems baffling, a courtier whose entire job revolves around, well, sitting beside the monarch in his most private moments. But by the 16th century, this role had evolved from a humble chamber valet into one of the most intimate positions a servant could hold. Though earlier medieval courts employed attendants for basic personal needs, Tudor chroniclers elevated the groom of the stool to a confidant who controlled access to the king's person, literally and figuratively. Other legends whisper of even older precedents in Frankish or Anglo-Saxon courts, where personal attendants measured wine and adjusted belts, yet historians still argue whether these early roles truly matched the Tudor office's unique blend of menial labor and political cachet. You brush aside a tasseled curtain and step in, heart beating in your ears. The only light comes from a small window high above, dust motes dancing in the shaft like drifting dreams. You cannot help but smile at the quiet absurdity. Here you are, kneeling before a monarch's backside, an act that, strange as it is, signals ultimate proximity to royal power. Overflowing privies in Europe were usually tucked away in separate towers. But Henry insisted yours be adjacent to his bedchamber, a deliberate choice to keep you within earshot of every whisper and breath. Your uniform is deceptively simple, a crimson velvet doublet, trim embroidered with gilded thread, and a pair of gloves, not for cleanliness so much as court semblance. You slip them on, careful not to fumble as you adjust the stool's linen cover. The fabric is washed daily in rosewater, and sometimes you press a drop of lavender oil into the corner. Little touches you've learned earn gentle praise from a king who cares, oddly, about his throne's fragrance. You settle yourself behind the stool, imagining how an unsuspecting visitor might picture this job, mere toilet attendant. In reality, it grants unparalleled access. While Henry contemplates treaties or composes poetry, you stand by to assist, and to listen. The crackle of the hearth, the shift of velvet drapes, or a stifled sigh all become signals in your silent vocabulary. You learn to interpret a tense pause as worry over a foreign marriage or a sudden cough as a hint at failing health. Over time, even a monarch's most practiced poker face slips in the privy. It's here you begin to understand why your predecessors, rough-hewn country lads or polished gentlemen, clawed their way into the role. The groom of the stool could influence appointments, secure loans, or temper royal anger with the quietest word. Yet, the power is invisible, a whisper carried on the still air of the privy. You know that by standing close enough to tidy up bodily matters, you stand close enough to guide royal decisions, and yet, every moment you're reminded of the job's oddity. You're called to service at dawn, mid-meal, or in the dead of night, whenever the king feels the call of nature or restlessness. A sharp knock precedes each summons, and you reply with disciplined curtsies despite your heart pounding like war drums. The corridor hush deepens whenever you pass, servants hovering in shadows as if uneasy to witness your strange privilege. As you smooth the linen cushions and arrange scented sachets, you can't help but marvel at the paradox, a task so humble in practice that it invites mockery, yet so exalted that only the most trusted gentleman of the realm may hold it. In these hush-filled moments, you realize that the groom of the stool is less about chamber pots and more about whispering winds of influence, an office built on delicate intimacy. Now, your shift begins. You stand ready with brush and cloth, prepared to perform duties both menial and monumental. Each scrape of the wooden stool echoes like a drumbeat in your memory. This is where secrets spill, where power breathes in close quarters, and where the line between servant and confidant blurs behind an unassuming door. You step back into the faint glow of candlelight and consider how this peculiar office came to be, how it transformed from a simple, practical job into one of medieval court's most unusual power centers. The origins of the groom of the stool are tangled in the mists of early monarchies, where personal attendants often doubled as confidants, guardians of privacy, and sometimes gatekeepers to a ruler's innermost thoughts. Imagine yourself centuries earlier, in a dim Anglo-Saxon hall. The king's personal attendant might be a trusted retainer who carries not just a stool, but the king's drinking horn, his sword, and, yes, helps with more delicate bodily matters. Early on, these roles were practical. Someone had to make sure the king was comfortable, clean, and ready to rule. But as courts became more elaborate, the position grew in prestige, even if the tasks remained somewhat embarrassing. By the 12th and 13th centuries, records show references to grooms and grooms of the chamber, attendants who served the monarch in intimate ways. Yet, it's the Tudor period, especially under Henry VII and Henry VIII, that crystallizes the groom of the stool into a formal office. The word stool here is quite literal. Your primary responsibility is assisting with the king's bowel movements, but the role is draped in ceremony, discretion, and political significance. The transformation was partly practical and partly political. Monarchs needed someone utterly loyal and discreet to manage their most vulnerable moments. After all, who better to keep secrets than the person who literally cleans up after you? The groom of the stool became a symbol of absolute trust, and with that trust came influence. You, as the groom, hold the keys not only to the privy but to the king's ear, able to sway moods, temper tempers, and relay messages in the shadows of royal chambers. The office also evolved alongside changes in court etiquette. As the Renaissance court blossomed with its layers of protocol, the groom's job took on a dual character. Yes, you're handling the king's physical needs, but you're also managing the intangible, his moods, his suspicions, and his whims. You learn the art of silence and the power of presence. Simply being there when the king is at his most vulnerable creates a bond stronger than most official titles. Your appointment might come from recommendation or family ties, but the process is exacting. The king's council and senior courtiers look for men with impeccable discretion, a gentle hand, and a subtle wit. There's a touch of irony. Of course, those who handle royal excretions must also navigate court intrigues and delicate politics without so much as a ripple in the velvet curtains. It's a balancing act that demands thick skin and a quick mind. You notice the role carries echoes from other European courts, too. In France, for example, the valet de chambre was a similar figure, but none enjoyed quite the same elevated status or proximity to royal power as the English groom of the stool. Even within England, the office's importance waxed and waned depending on the monarch's personality and political climate. Henry VIII's obsession with control and intimacy made your position indispensable, whereas some later kings preferred more distant attendants or even abolished the role altogether. It's fascinating to realize that behind the grandeur of castles and banquets, royal hygiene was a matter of state. There was no plumber's call to fix a clogged throne in those days, just the groom, armed with brushes, rags, and a careful hand, ensuring that everything was kept tidy and dignified. You, the groom, were the unsung guardian of royal comfort, an invisible presence who made sure the machinery of monarchy ran smoothly, right down to its most basic functions. Historians still argue whether the groom of the stool wielded genuine political power or merely symbolic influence. Some suggest that the closeness to the king allowed you to manipulate favors and policy behind the scenes. Others argue your role was more servant than statesman, a delicate position that required utmost loyalty and little ambition. Whatever the truth, it's clear your presence shaped the court's daily rhythm, from dawn prayers to the last whispered confidences at bedtime, you can almost hear the creak of the heavy door closing behind you as you take your place once more beside the stool. The office's origins remind you how human and, yes, awkward history can be, and how the closest bonds are often forged in the humblest of moments. You push open the heavy oak door again, and this time your gaze falls fully on the royal privy itself, the chamber where your daily service takes place, the small kingdom within the castle dedicated to the most private of royal needs. The room is compact but carefully appointed, sturdy wooden panels line the walls, their surface polished to a warm glow by years of careful rubbing. There's a faint, lingering scent of lavender and pine, the king's favorite oils, meant to soften what might otherwise be a less than pleasant atmosphere. At the center sits the wooden stool, plain in design but commanding in its presence. It's not just a simple seat, it's a symbol of the king's physical sovereignty. A throne of a very different kind. The stool's surface is worn smooth, its edges rounded from countless uses, yet it remains sturdy and well-crafted, a testament to medieval carpentry. Linen cloths, washed daily in rosewater, cover the seat, and small embroidered cushions add a touch of softness. The whole setup suggests a ritual, not merely a chore. The room's air carries a peculiar mix of warmth and coolness. The nearby hearth, a tiny cast-iron stove nestled in the corner, casts flickering shadows across the floorboards, while a small window set high lets in a sliver of natural light. You notice the heavy tapestry draped beside the doorway, designed to muffle sound and preserve privacy. Every detail is designed to create a private sanctuary, away from prying eyes and ears. As you stand inside, you become aware of the subtle sounds that fill the space, the soft rustle of your own clothing, the occasional creak of the wooden floor beneath your boots, and, if you listen closely, the faint tapping of a distant court lute drifting through the corridors. The medieval court, bustling just beyond these walls, fades into a muffled hum, replaced by the almost sacred quiet of this chamber. You take a moment to consider the stool's placement in relation to the rest of the castle. It sits close enough to the king's bedchamber that you are never far from his presence, yet far enough removed to maintain decorum. This proximity means that you are part of the king's waking moments as much as his resting hours. Your service starts with the first sign of need and ends only when the king retires for the night. The privy chamber is more than just a practical space, it's where political power subtly pulses beneath the surface. In these quiet moments, the king is vulnerable, and you, his groom, become both caretaker and confidant. The stool itself is a silent witness to whispered secrets, hurried decisions, and the occasional bout of royal frustration. You learn to read every sigh, every shift in posture, as though decoding a secret language. Nearby, small shelves hold an assortment of implements, wooden bowls for washing, fragrant linens, and tiny bottles of perfumed oil. These tools are your trusted allies, and you treat them with care, knowing that any slip could cause discomfort or worse, royal displeasure. The ritual of preparation and cleanup is precise, almost meditative, blending practical skill with an unexpected tenderness. Your routine includes lighting a small taper, gently easing the curtains closed, and laying out the linens just so. The stool's surface is checked and rechecked for cleanliness. Each step performed with an attentiveness born of both respect and a deep understanding of the king's preferences. The lingering scent of lavender and rosemary in the air is as much a comfort to the monarch as it is to you. You can't help but think that few jobs demand such a curious combination of physical care and emotional sensitivity. The groom of the stool must be patient, discreet, and above all, utterly dependable. The very atmosphere of the privy, calm, soothing, and intimate, reflects the qualities required of its attendant. It's a place of paradox, a chamber devoted to the most private human functions, yet a site of great trust and subtle power. As you settle the cushions one last time, you realize how the privy serves as a kind of backstage for the king's daily performance, an unglamorous but essential space that keeps the whole court functioning. And in this quiet chamber, your role is not just to serve, but to listen, observe, and support in ways no one else can. You arrive early this morning as the castle still breathes its quiet dawn sighs. The air feels cool and damp, the faint scent of wood smoke curling through the stone corridors. You're ready to begin your daily rituals, the tasks that mark your role as groom of the stool, a blend of routine and reverence that feels more like a carefully choreographed dance than mere service. Your first step is to prepare the privy chamber itself. You carefully spread fresh linens over the stool, their rosewater scent soothing and faintly floral, a gentle reminder that even in the most humble tasks, grace matters. You arrange small bundles of dried lavender and rosemary nearby, subtle touches intended to mask the less pleasant odors and soothe both king and servant alike. The room's warmth grows as you stoke the small stove, its flickering light casting comforting shadows that feel almost like a protective cloak. Once the chamber is ready, you attend to your own appearance. Polished boots, a neatly tied doublet, and gloves that keep your hands clean and dignified. This attention to detail is not vanity, it is part of the respect you must show to your monarch, even in this most unglamorous role. You know that every aspect of your presence sends a message about your devotion and discretion. Then the king calls. A soft knock, barely louder than a whisper, signals your moment to serve. You enter quietly, your footsteps muffled by the thick tapestries lining the corridor. The king is already settled, the faintest crease of discomfort on his brow betraying the nature of his visit. You offer a respectful nod and position yourself behind the stool, ready to assist without intrusion. Throughout the service, you maintain a delicate balance of attentiveness and invisibility. Your hands move with practiced care, smoothing linens, offering towels, and ensuring the king's comfort. The air is thick with a sense of shared trust. Here, social hierarchies blur, replaced by a moment of mutual vulnerability. You catch fleeting glances, a twitch of an eye, a small sigh. You learn to read these as carefully as any courtly letter or royal decree. Between duties, you're privy to the king's whispered confidences, brief remarks about court affairs, musings on policy, or quiet reflections on his health and fears. These moments may seem trivial, but you know better. The smallest comment here can ripple through the court like a stone cast into still water. You hold these secrets close, understanding the immense responsibility that comes with such intimacy. Your etiquette is governed by unspoken rules. You never interrupt unless spoken to, your voice soft and measured when needed. You avoid eye contact during the most private moments, yet your presence must be reassuring, a steady anchor amid the king's solitude. It's a dance of discretion, where every gesture counts. Between visits, you tidy the chamber meticulously. The brush strokes over the wood are rhythmic and soothing, a brief meditation that calms your own mind after the tension of service. You polish the stool's surfaces, fold linens with care, and arrange perfumed sachets just so, each act a quiet ritual honoring the dignity of your charge. You notice how this role demands more than just physical service, it calls for emotional intelligence, patience, and a keen awareness of human fragility. The groom of the stool is a silent witness to the king's vulnerabilities, privy to moments no one else will see. This connection, as strange as it may seem, becomes a source of quiet power and profound loyalty. In these quiet, slow-paced rituals, you find a strange comfort. The steady rhythm of preparing, serving, and tidying forms a gentle loop that anchors the day. As the court buzzes beyond the stone walls, here in the privy chamber time seems to stretch and soften, an oasis of calm shaped by the most human of needs. You linger in the faint afterglow of your last service, the embers in the little stove crackling like a contented sigh. Here, in the lingering hush, you feel the full weight of the bond between you and the king, a connection built on the most private of acts, and yet, paradoxically, the deepest form of trust. As you smooth the rosewater-scented linen for the third time this morning, you realize you're not just a servant, you're an extension of the monarch's privacy, a confidant cloaked in crimson velvet. Every time you stand behind that wooden stool, you're granted a window into the king's vulnerabilities. It's not just biology that unites you, it's the unspoken agreement that the secrets you witness will stay hidden, buried deeper than any chamber pot. You catch yourself thinking of the stool as a silent counselor, absorbing worries, fears, and newfound ambitions along with the more earthy offerings. The intimacy here transcends court hierarchy, forging a bond that few lords or ladies can claim. You recall the first time the king confided a personal fear, his trembling voice betraying concerns about succession and legacy. You were kneeling, brush in hand, eyes respectfully lowered, but your heart thundered like a marching regiment. That moment reshaped your understanding of the role. You are more than a cleaner of seats, you are a guardian of confidence. Whispered comments about alliances with France or doubts over a new treaty slip out when the mind is relaxed. And you've learned to recognize these low, hushed tones as the court's most valuable intelligence. Yet, historians still argue whether this closeness really translated into genuine political power or remained a symbolic intimacy. Some argue your influence could move the crown's policies. How could it not, when you understood the king's moods before any council member? Others counter that your station, no matter how privileged, kept you at arm's length from formal decision-making. The debate rages much like a game of court chess, with no end in sight. You've heard whispers that previous grooms steered diplomatic missions simply by echoing a casual comment made in the privy. A slip, "I wish the French envoy weren't so persistent," casually muttered while you cleaned. Days later, the king delays an ambassadorial banquet. Coincidence? Maybe, but court gossip grows like ivy. Modern asides aside, it seems unbelievable that a toilet attendant could mold statecraft, yet here you are, part of a chain of influence, if only by virtue of proximity and timing. When you reflect on your position at dinner tables, the other courtiers eye you with a mix of envy and amusement. "Oh, here comes the king's favorite pooper-scooper," they joke under their breath, but you don't mind. You know that beneath the japes and whispered nicknames lies respect, tinged with a little awe. Few dare mock the groom too loudly. After all, you can slip behind a tapestry and return with news no one else possesses. It's like being a spy, but without cloak and dagger, just gloves and a wooden brush. You find the king triggers certain micro-expressions when he's comfortable, a slight relaxation of the shoulders, a rush of warmth to his cheeks, the way his breath steadies. You've become fluent in this body language. Sometimes you wonder if the king feels less alone knowing someone is there in those quiet moments, attending to his most basic needs with care and discretion. It's a strange kind of companionship, bound by ritual and reinforced by years of shared hushes. Your role brings occasional awkwardness, of course. One evening, the king hesitates mid-sentence, an unfinished thought hanging between you, and you have to decide whether to break the silence or stay still as a statue. You opt for tactful stillness. Later, in the antechamber, the courtiers whisper, "He's been unusually reticent these days," unaware that their monarch simply forgot the rest of his thought while you scrambled for a clean linen. It's the little things that illustrate your unseen influence. Amid all this, you've developed a genteel sense of humor about your station. You joke to yourself that you handle so much royal waste, you're practically the kingdom's most efficient recycler, long before anyone invented the word. You might even earn a modern eco-friendly badge, if anyone knew. Joke 1. And when the chamber camera never arrives, thank medieval ingenuity, your privacy remains intact, and you don't have to worry about racking up embarrassing YouTube views. Joke 2. Despite the jokes, you recognize the seriousness of your trust. Lost letters, whispered regrets, or sudden flares of royal temper all pass through your hands. A misplaced glance from the king is enough to remind you that discretion is both your shield and your sword. You move through the castle corridors with a silent confidence, aware that your reputation for loyalty is your greatest asset, and yet, every so often you wonder about the line between service and influence. When you tuck a perfumed cloth beside the stool and the king murmurs, "This scent reminds me of home," are you forging emotional ties or merely doing your job? When you catch a hint of hesitation in his breathe, is it your duty to press for clarity or to remain a silent witness? These questions linger, unresolved as the debates among scholars. By the time your shift ends, you feel the day's weight in your bones, the bowing, the kneeling, the careful choreography of every movement. Yet there's a quiet satisfaction too. To be trusted so fully, to share in the monarch's solitude, is both honor and burden. You collect your brushes and linens, wrap them neatly, and step back into the corridor, ready to vanish into the tapestry like a ghost, always present, seldom seen. In those final steps away from the stool, you carry with you more than wood and linen, you bear a fragment of the king's inner world. And as your boots fade down the hallway, you know the true paradox: by serving at the most humble of stations, you occupy one of the highest realms of royal confidence. You find yourself standing in the cold draft of the castle's lower corridors, waiting for the steward to arrive with the young candidates. It's early morning, and the air still hums with the distant clatter of breakfast service. Today, you're both mentor and examiner, ready to assess the next generation of grooms of the stool. Behind the grand tapestries and polished floors lies a secretive selection process, a medieval apprenticeship more peculiar than forging swords or learning courtly dance. The steward ushers in 3 boys, all barely into their teens, clutching small bundles of cloth and wood shavings. Their eyes are wide, filled with curiosity and a touch of fear. You recall your own first day, the nervous knot in your stomach, the thrill of proximity to royalty, and the mortifying realization that you'd be cleaning up after a king. They stand before you in rough-spun tunics, shifting from foot to foot. You sense that they've heard the rumors, some flattering, some vulgar, about what being groom entails. You begin with a simple test: discretion. You whisper a phrase, "The roses in the garden bloom in moonlight," and tell them this must remain between you and the king. Each boy repeats it softly, but only one delivers it back with the right hushed tone, as if sharing a secret in a lover's ear. You nod, offering a slight, approving smile. This subtlety is crucial. The wrong word in the wrong ear can send court alliances tumbling like poorly stacked porcelain. Next comes endurance. You lead them into the privy chamber, where the wooden stool waits like a silent sentinel. The task is to carry the stool's heavy carved hearth brush and linen crate without spilling, an exercise in balance and composure. You watch as elbows jostle and wool tunics snag on door frames. The boy who navigates without a single slip or clatter earns another nod. You joke, under your breath, that he'd handle a royal food tray better than half the courtiers you've seen. Then, hygiene protocol. You demonstrate how to freshen the linen cloth: a careful dunk in rosewater, a gentle press, and a precise fold. You instruct them on adding a single drop of lavender oil, no more, or the scent overwhelms, and how to wipe the rim of the stool without missing a corner. You watch their hands tremble when they try, and you guide them patiently. After all, one misstep could lead to a pungent mistake that lingers for days, haunting every noble who passes by. Beyond physical tasks, you assess temperament. You arrange a mock scenario: the king awakens at dawn with a sudden bout of discomfort, barking orders. You act as the monarch, issuing curt demands and abrupt changes. The boys must respond with calm efficiency: no complaints, no hesitation, no fluster. One candidate flinches when you slam the palm of your hand on the stool, another stammers. Only the last boy remains composed, responding with measured bows and swift movements. You see in him the steadiness required to soothe a ruffled sovereign. Finally, there's the lesson in loyalty. You recount a tale of your predecessor, who once slipped secrets to a rival court after a single harsh reprimand. The episode ended in disgrace, but also taught your order the price of broken trust. You watched the boy's expressions, searching for genuine remorse and a spark of devotion. The chosen candidate must value loyalty above his own comfort. You ask them to swear an oath, silent, binding, and unbreakable, as you trace the king's crest in your palm. When the tests conclude, the steward steps forward and names the victor. The boy stands a little taller, chest swelling with pride, though his gaze flickers with nerves when he realizes the gravity of his new path. You place a guiding hand on his shoulder and present him with the groom's first tools: a small brush, a linen pouch, and a vial of rosewater. In that moment, his journey truly begins, an apprenticeship defined by the hush of chambers and the weight of secrets. As the new apprentice scrambles to stow his bundle, you offer him a final piece of advice: remember, the throne you serve may shift over time, but the trust you keep here is eternal." He nods, though you know he'll learn the full meaning only after his first midnight summons. You send him off to fetch fresh firewood for the privy stove, a humble task, but one that reminds him, no duty is beneath the groom, and every act matters. You linger for a moment, watching the boy vanish down the corridor. You think of your own early days, the nervous excitement that mingled with embarrassment, and how you grew into your role, step by careful step. His footsteps fade, but you can already sense the apprenticeship taking root. One day, he'll stand here, gloves on, brush in hand, learning to read royal sighs and whispered fears just as you taught him. With the chamber once more quiet, you gather your own tools and prepare for the king's next call. The cycle continues, unbroken: instruction, service, trust, and service again. In this way, centuries of groomship pass from hand to hand, tied together by the silent grooves of that wooden stool and the soft echoes of secrets shared in the hush of power. You step into the grand hall just as midday light filters through stained glass, painting jewel-toned patterns on the flagstones. Courtiers bustle around the long tables, exchanging news of alliances, debts, and the latest fashions. And there you stand, the groom of the stool, in your crimson doublet, caught in a delicate paradox. Your title marks you as handler of the king's most private moments, yet here you are, part of the court's exclusive inner circle. Your social status is a study in contrasts. On the one hand, you shoulder a task that most nobles would shun: you're the one who cleans royal. Well, you know. On the other, you dine at the high table, laugh at the king's jests, and hear gossip whispered before anyone else. It's this odd blend of lowly labor and elevated privilege that makes your station so unique. You move through the hall with measured steps, acknowledging nods from dukes and jesters alike, yet carrying the weight of discretion like a mantle. Imagine yourself at the high table, the king seated at its center. Goblets of spiced wine shimmer in the candlelight, platters of venison and sweetmeats fill the air with rich aromas, and minstrels tune their lutes for the afternoon's entertainment. You're not meant to eat at the table, your service comes before and after, but you stand just behind the king's chair, a silent sentinel. Your presence is a reminder that behind every grand seat sits an even more modest one. A gentle lesson in humility that befits a court so deeply conscious of rank. Other courtiers eye you curiously. The ambassador from France tilts his head, wondering why a groom would be so close to royal affairs. The bishop eyes your velvet trim as if pondering whether it's appropriate for a toilet attendant to sport such finery. Yet, you're never completely excluded. Invitations to private audiences sometimes slip your way, not as a formal guest but as a silent observer. You're party to the hush-hush conversations that shape court policy. Even if you're not officially at the table, your station also brings perks that offset the embarrassment of your chores. You receive a handsome annual stipend, access to rare fabrics for your tunics, and invitations to tournaments where only gentlemen of stature may attend. Your role grants you a discreet degree of financial stability unusual for someone without land holdings. You can swap gossip for small loans, ask favors of minor nobles, and, on occasion, borrow a sword when politics heat up. All because you mastered the art of invisible service, yet, tensions simmer beneath the surface. Nobles of higher birth sometimes bristle at the notion that an attendant could wield such soft power. They whisper about your lowly chores, employ sly jibes, careful not to soil your gloves. Groom, they quip as you sweep the privy's floor. But you've learned to meet jests with a polite smile. After all, a direct confrontation could cost you your position. You've witnessed too many ambitious grooms overstep their bounds, only to be unceremoniously stripped of their office. Despite the scrutiny, you enjoy an intimate familiarity with the king's personal habits, which spices soothe his stomach after a rich meal, the precise angle he prefers his stool's cushion, when he likes the stove warm just enough to avoid a morning chill. These details might seem trivial, but they carve you a niche in court life. You're valued not for your lineage but for your competence. In a world obsessed with bloodlines, you're living proof that skill and loyalty can earn a man a place among nobles, to maintain this balance, you adopt a mindful approach to court politics. You never boast of your closeness, instead, you cultivate a reputation for unobtrusive efficiency. You smile when summoned but never overextend an invitation. You share a quip with a guard captain but don't linger in gossip. Your humor is gentle. Today you joke that you've cleaned up enough royal business to fill the moat twice over. Later, you tease a page that if he misplaces his slipper, you'll track it down with the same zeal you track royal droppings. Your ties to other courtiers also help you walk the social tightrope. The master of revels gifts you a small token after a successful masque, the keeper of the privy purse offers you discreet advice on your accounts, and the chancellor occasionally seeks your private ear to test a policy idea. These alliances sustain you, reminding you that the court functions as an intricate web where every role, however humble or grand, interlocks, but your station's dual nature weighs on you. At dawn, you kneel to serve, sweat beading on your brow as you steady the stool. At dusk, you join music in the great hall, the laughter warm on your velvet sleeves. You're a shapeshifter of sorts, moving between laborer and gentleman without quite belonging fully to either world. The constant negotiation of these identities is exhausting yet exhilarating, a career path no one could have scripted except history. As the sun dips toward the western battlements and torches flicker alive, you gather your gloves and linen wraps, ready to return to the privy chamber. You know the next call could come at any moment, and courtiers will soon file off to feast or gossip. You depart the hall with the same careful poise you enter it, leaving behind the clatter of plates and the swirl of silk. In that transition lies the heart of your paradoxical status. By serving the most basic human function, you transcend it, becoming an indispensable figure in the tapestry of court life. You stand alone yet ever connected, rooted in humility yet soaring on the wings of royal confidence. And as you step once more toward the hush of the privy, you accept that your odd station is both a burden and a gift, a simultaneous low chord and high note in the court symphony. You slip back into the flickering candlelight of the privy corridor, heart humming with anticipation. Today, you're not just any groom of the stool, you're part of a lineage of remarkable men, each with a story that swings between triumph and downfall like a pendulum. You pause before the stout oak door and picture those who held this odd office before you, their names whispered in court rumor and chronicler scrolls. First, there's Sir William Compton, a favorite of Henry VIII who transformed his privy duties into an impressive political springboard. As groom, Compton attended the king more often than most courtiers ever saw him, mastering the art of timing, arriving just as the monarch needed him, and pausing never a moment longer than decorum required. You can almost hear his whispered counsel echoing down the corridors. His rise was meteoric. By his death, he held several key offices, cementing his family's status. Yet the very proximity that elevated him would later fuel jealousy among peers, proof that even a throne-based stool can become a stepping stone for ambition. Then there's the tale of Sir Nicholas Carew, another one-time groom whose fortunes soared until charges of treason sent him to the scaffold. Carew's downfall was swift. Accused of plotting with foreign powers during a visit to France, his once favored name was struck from court lists. You wonder whether his intimate knowledge of the king's health and habits made him too powerful, or perhaps too trusted for comfort. Either way, his story reminds you that riding the splashes of royal favor can be a slippery affair, particularly when your station involves more than a simple handshake. Across the Channel, in the French court, François de Villeroy served as valet de chambre to King Louis XIV, wielding similar intimate influence yet claiming a gentler title. Known for his unflappable composure, de Villeroy managed the Sun King's most private moments without a single lavender sachet misapplied. His legacy endures in memoirs that describe his discreet wit, always ready with a soft-spoken jest when the king needed distraction from court intrigue. Some even say he kept a miniature lute behind the screen and quietly strummed melodies if Louis paused too long in his reveries. Quirky tidbit. You suspect such musical interludes would earn you an extra tip today, back in England. Sir Walter Raleigh's young relative, also a groom of the stool, earned a peculiar reputation. he introduced a tub of iced rosewater for the king's chamber, prefiguring the first royal spa treatment. While it seems an extravagant luxury now, you imagine how refreshing it must have felt on a sweltering summer day. No need for modern air conditioning when you have flowers and ice. Raleigh's kinsman leveraged this novelty into a minor court triumph, though he later found himself overshadowed by more daring explorers. His brief splash in the Privy Annals remains a charming footnote. Not every groom sought grand ambitions. There was the obscure Edward Mountjoy, who served quietly under Edward VI. Beloved for his sense of humor and kindness. When the young king fretted over his gout, Mountjoy crafted a gentle poultice that soothed royal aches and earned his all-important smile. He never held other offices, but he's remembered in one minor chronicle as the kind groom, a testament to how small acts of care in the privy could leave a lasting impression. Quirky tidbit. You'd like to meet him. After all, every king needs someone to watch his back, or rather, his backside. Of course, not all stories ended well. Thomas Heneage, a groom under Henry VIII, amassed significant estates thanks to royal grants, yet struggled with court factions fanning rumors of impropriety. Some whispers even questioned whether he'd overstepped boundaries, using his privy secrets for blackmail. Though he survived the king's wrath, the shadow of scandal dogged him, a cautionary example that too much power, even from behind a wooden stool, can corrupt or invite distrust. What ties these figures together isn't just their shared title, it's how each harnessed, or stumbled under, the unique proximity to the monarch. You reflect on your own modest share of influence, a gentle word here, a timely nudge there. Perhaps you're more like Mountjoy, quietly earning favor through empathy. Or maybe you lean toward Compton's political acumen, subtly guiding court decisions. Whichever path you tread, you're walking in the footsteps of colorful predecessors, their echoes whispering through the scented air of this chamber. You imagine a conversation with Compton, whose fine doublet once brushed these same timbers. Sir William, you'd murmur, what's the key to keeping a king both clean and content? He'd likely grin, tapping the oak rim, and reply, anticipate his needs before he knows them, and never underestimate the power of a well-timed jest. You tuck that advice away. A mental gem as valuable as any purse of coins. As you lay out your own scented linens, you feel the weight of history settle around you like a velvet cloak. Each groom before you added a stanza to the office's strange verse, some triumphant, others tragic, all intimate. Their stories remind you that your role has always been more than mere sanitation. It's an unbroken tradition of trust, humor, and sometimes, controversy. You take a deep breath, inhaling the lavender rose blend, and smile at the thought that, despite all the power plays, it's the simplest kindnesses that endure in memory. The chamber might be small, the job peculiar, but it's here that history's quiet heroes have left their mark behind the scenes, literally and figuratively. You slip into the privy corridor, the echo of distant laughter from the great hall trailing behind you like a half-forgotten tune. The door swings open on its leather hinges, revealing your tiny sanctuary, and you kneel beside the stool as you have countless times before. But today, as you settle the lavender-scented linen, you're thinking not of comfort but of conversation, those brief, hushed exchanges that slip out between brush strokes and towel placements, carrying weight far beyond their words. Imagine the king arriving for his morning relief, his doublet still tight from yesterday's feast. You position the folded cloth just right, and as he settles, he murmurs, I grow weary of the French envoy's insistence. It's a casual remark, tossed off like a crumb, but you catch the understated irritation beneath the syllables. Later, over tea with the Lord Chancellor, you mention the king's displeasure, no names, just an aside about diplomatic fatigue. Before long, the envoy's audience is delayed, and courtiers reshuffle their priorities. All because of a soft word in this quiet chamber. Over time, you learn that these relief breaks are fertile ground for political intelligence. The king's guards might peek through the door's gap, but they rarely linger. The real theater is inside. You become attuned to subtle shifts, a clipped tone when discussing Scotland, a heavier sigh at news of depleted coffers. Each exhalation, each hesitation, becomes a breadcrumb you follow back to the council table. And when you whisper those breadcrumbs to trusted allies, perhaps the master of the horse or a favorite page, the court begins to dance to a new rhythm. You remember one afternoon when the candle's flame flickered as you arranged fresh herbs in a basin. The king muttered something about unrest in the north, too many clans drifting into lawlessness. Rather than triage the comment immediately, you paused, allowed the flame to steady, then asked softly, would a show of royal benevolence calm their spirits? He considered it, fingers tapping the stool's rim. Within days, you heard of a sudden grant of grazing rights to a troublesome laird, a gesture that quieted rebellion without a single sword drawn. Your interjection, born of a simple question, rippled into peaceful policy. Offhand remarks about the royal household itself also carry surprising influence. Once, the king grumbled about the chapel's new organ, calling it too loud a bell for prayers. You mentioned the discomfort in your next audience with the dean, noting that a softer chime might suit early mornings. Weeks later, the organ pipes were modified, and choir practice resumed without complaints. It's a small victory, yes, but in this court, even minor adjustments can polish the crown's image. Sometimes, the courtiers themselves slip you snippets during changeovers. A page might approach you with a furtive grin, my lord's daughter waves at you from the gallery, knowing full well you bear news back to the king. You carry these notes like promises of sunshine after storms, little whispers of goodwill that smooth alliances or soften rivalries. You're not the official messenger, but your path is often the shortest between intent and action. Your role as intermediary extends beyond politics. You've filtered rumors about the Queen's rumored French favorites, gently steering the king's mood before he remarks publicly. You've caught hearsay of a brewing dispute between two duchesses, thin threads of court gossip spun during your poised silence. Your reputation for discretion means whispers trust you, and in turn, you guide those whispers toward resolution rather than scandal. Of course, not every offhand comment leads to a policy shift. Some murmurs fade like candle smoke, dissipating before they inspire change. But every so often, you hit the mark perfectly. Your question nudges the king's thinking, or your careful relay to a favored minister sets events into motion. You learn to choose your moments, when to keep a remark in the privy's hush, and when to let it slip into the halls of power. These whispered politics require a delicate moral compass. You're neither judge nor prosecutor, you're a vessel for unguarded thoughts. Sometimes you wonder if you should challenge certain comments, if a stray barb against a foreign ally merits gentle correction. Other times, you think your neutrality serves best, leaving decisions to those at the council table. Either way, you hold the line, no records, no gossip mills, just moments shared in confidence. Your humor lightens the gravity of such tasks. You joke that you're the realm's premier downstairs diplomat, trading in secrets rather than silver. Later, you quip to the page that if politics were measured by volume, you'd be the quietest powerhouse in all England. These asides remind you that, though the stakes are high, a whisper can undercut the tension like a well-timed tickle. One chilly evening, you overhear the king lamenting supply shortages. He sighs, our coffers near empty. You suggest, softly, that deferring a lavish banquet could ease the strain. He nods, and the next week, the festival is scaled back, the savings redirected to paying mercenaries on the Scottish border. A hushed suggestion, a prudent economy, another ripple from your subtle hand. The beauty of whispered politics is its invisibility. No parchment records your involvement, no herald proclaims your advisory role. Your influence drifts like mist through the castle, touching decisions without leaving footprints. In a world of public proclamations and grand pageantry, you thrive in the margins. Where words float softest and power slips through unseen cracks, as you extinguish the small taper and fold the last linen, you sense how essential these quiet interventions have become. Your mastery of offhand diplomacy shapes the court's pulse, steering policies and smoothing tensions without ever drawing a sword or raising a voice. And when you step back into the corridor, the hush of the privy seems to deepen, as if acknowledging that its walls hold more weight than the stone they're made of. You gather your tools and prepare for the next whispered exchange, knowing that every gentle word carries the potential to shift alliances, diffuse rivalries, and guide the kingdom's fate, all in the hushed sanctuary of the Stool. You step into the privy chamber just as the last flicker of sunset slips through the narrow window, draping the walls in a dim, forgiving glow. Today, your usual steady calm feels tinged with the memory of past missteps, those moments when secrets slipped, loyalties faltered, or scandal erupted like wildfire through the corridors of power. It's time to examine the controversies that shadow the office of Groom of the Stool and ponder how a place of trust could so easily become a crucible for betrayal. Your mind drifts first to the whisper that launched 100 rumors, a misplaced letter, supposedly from the king, found in the possession of a rival courtier. The tale goes that the groom, tasked with safeguarding the king's personal correspondence, left it momentarily unattended on the privy table. In that brief lapse, the letter vanished, and suddenly, accusations flew. Had the groom intentionally leaked the contents to curry favor with the duke, or was it merely negligence? Historians still debate whether this episode reflected a calculated act of betrayal or a tragic oversight born of human error. Either way, the fallout was swift, trust fractured, alliances crumbled, and the king's confidence wavered. You imagine the tension that must have filled the chamber when the incident came to light. The groom kneels behind the stool, heart pounding like war drums, facing the monarch's stern gaze through the gap in the tapestry. No words are spoken, just the raw weight of expectation. The king's silence is a verdict in itself, and the groom's world narrows to the scent of lavender oil and the cold touch of oak beneath his knee. In the aftermath, the office's reputation bore a stain that took years to scrub away, if it ever fully did. Then there was the scandal that rocked Henry VIII's later court, rumors that a groom of the stool had subtly manipulated the king's medications. Some courtiers whispered that certain attendants, jealous of political rivals, adulterated herbal remedies, adding a hint of soporific drug or a dash of bitter root, to influence the king's mood and decisions. Whether these tales were founded or mere sensational gossip, they exposed the dark potential of your role. The very tools you wield, oils, herbs, waters, could become instruments of control or harm. The controversy sparked frantic inquiries. Apothecaries were summoned, stools were inspected, and attendants were scrutinized for the slightest misstep. The result? A tightening of procedures, every vial sealed with the king's cipher, every linen cloth accounted for in triplicate. The groom's autonomy shrank beneath layers of oversight, a stark reminder that the highest intimacy carries the greatest risk. On a lighter but no less contentious note, there was the infamous perfume debacle under Elizabeth I. A well-meaning groom introduced a new blend, jasmine, bergamot, and something called orris root, to freshen the privy. Within hours, courtiers complained of headaches, the king sneezed through council meetings, and ambassadors questioned England's sanity. A perfume-sensitive monarch, it turns out, is no innocent party. The groom's reputation took a hit. Though he escaped without formal censure, but whispers of incompetence followed him long after his service ended. Scandals weren't confined to England. In France, the valet de chambre of Louis XIII faced rumors of an illicit affair with a noblewoman who met the king in secret. The attendant was accused of delivering clandestine messages via the privy channel, a breach so intimate that it bordered on treason. Although evidence remained elusive and scholars still argue whether the affair ever occurred, the rumor alone rattled the valet's standing and fueled court gossip for seasons. Closer to home, another groom earned infamy by smuggling coins hidden in the linen wraps. Charged with pocketing small sums from the king's gold purse, he was arrested in the very corridor where he once moved unseen. His trial became legend. Guards discovered the coins, the linen bundle, and a hastily scrawled note promising loyalty. In the end, the man confessed to desperate greed, confessing that the stagnation of his stipend drove him to risk everything. The punishment was public shaming and forfeiture of lands, an ignominious end for a man once so near the throne. These episodes underscore a sobering truth: the groom's position, loaded with intimacy and discretion, can slip into opportunities for betrayal. Yet, simultaneous to these betrayals, the office saw true devotion and honor. Some grooms, scarred by scandal around them, doubled down on rigorous standards, meticulous logs, secret pledges, and daily affirmations of loyalty. They transformed the privy into a vault of unbreakable trust, proving that human fallibility can be countered by ritual and integrity. Your own practice borrows from these lessons. You seal herbal vials with wax imprinted by your signet, record every scent blend in a hidden ledger, and refresh linens under a strict schedule signed off by a chamber steward. You know that the office's shadows lengthen whenever a single breach occurs, so you guard your tools, and your honor, vigilantly. As you tuck fresh lavender into the stove's embers, you reflect on the scholars' debates. Was scandal an inevitable byproduct of such closeness, or did the office's very design invite misuse? Some say the groom of the stool was destined to walk a knife's edge between servant and confidant, always one misstep away from disgrace. Others argue the scandals were exceptions, dramatic outliers in a history defined more by loyalty than treachery. Whatever the balance, the controversies of past grooms have shaped your own vigilance. Behind every scandal lies a lesson, that trust must be earned daily, rituals must be observed without fail, and even the humblest duty can echo through history when performed, or neglected, at the highest level. You stand, tools in hand, ready to serve once more. The past scandals hover like ghosts, but in their wake, you've forged a practice of unassailable discretion. And as you step into the chamber's hush, you carry with you the knowledge that the greatest safeguard against controversy is nothing more glamorous than unwavering care. The moment you enter the chamber, your eyes drift to the neatly arranged tools of your trade, each one indispensable, each one carrying secrets of kings past and present. You kneel behind the stool and reach for your first implement, the carved wooden brush. Its handle is smooth, shaped to fit your grip perfectly, and the bristles are stiff enough to dislodge any residue yet gentle enough to preserve the wood's finish. This simple object is your primary ally, the first line of defense against discomfort and indignity. Next, you pick up the linen cloths, folded precisely into thirds. They're woven from fine flax, soft to the touch but absorbent, and laundered in rosewater and lavender infusion. You learned early on that the quality of the linen matters as much as its cleanliness. Coarse fibers invite irritation, while overly slick fabric risks slipping at inopportune moments. As you unfurl a cloth, you marvel at how something so mundane becomes a symbol of royal care. On the small shelf nearby sits a row of tiny bottles, herbal oils and scented waters, each labeled in delicate black script. There's lavender water for soothing, peppermint for a refreshing tingle, and a curious blend called Sleepy Night, rumored to include traces of frankincense and hops. You unscrew the cap of the lavender water and hold it to your nose, inhaling its soft floral notes. You dab a single drop on a corner of the cloth, knowing that too much would overwhelm the chamber's gentle hush. Then there's the basin, a shallow wooden bowl that you fill with warm water drawn from the castle's spring. You've rigged a contraption of leather tubes and lead piping to ensure the temperature stays constant, a small innovation that earned you quiet praise from the king himself. The bowl's rounded edges rest on a carved stand, elevating it just above knee height, so you can swirl the water and rinse linens without disrupting the stool's balance. It's a masterpiece of functional design, proving that hygiene and comfort need not be mutually exclusive. Beside the basin lies a small wooden box containing your secret tools, a carved spoon for stirring herbal infusions, a thin blade for scraping stubborn residue, and a delicate spatula for applying scented balms to the stool's rim. These implements are hidden during formal inspections, yet you treat them with the utmost respect. Each tool has a precise purpose, and you maintain them meticulously, oiling joints and sharpening edges in a weekly ritual that you perform with meditative focus. A final instrument sits on a velvet cushion, the groom's signet ring. You slip it onto your finger, feeling the weight of its silver band and the engraved crest of England pressed against your skin. This ring isn't merely decorative, it serves as an official seal for your wax-stamped vials of herbal remedies and a mark of your office when you sign discreet logs for the chamber steward. It's the only piece of jewelry you wear in the privy, and it reminds you of your dual role as craftsman and custodian of royal well-being. You take a moment to arrange these tools, aligning brushes with basins and bottles with cloths. This organization is crucial for efficiency but also an act of respect. Each item deserves its place, just as every ritual gesture honors the king's dignity. You imagine the chamber as a stage and your tools as actors, waiting in poised readiness for their cues. During service, these implements move through a choreography refined over years. You brush, you rinse, you scent, you wipe, all in seamless succession. The king feels the tang of warm water, the softness of linen, and the breath of lavender, sensations that speak of care rather than duty. The stool's carved edges gleam under your attentive hands, polished not just for function but to convey a quiet reverence. Between duties, you inspect each tool. The bristles on the brush are trimmed to uniform length, the linen cloths show no frayed edges, the oils contain no sediment, the basin stand is free of cracks. You record these checks in your private ledger, keeping a silent tally that ensures no detail is overlooked. It's a record written in your own neat hand, visible only to you and perhaps the chamber steward if he ever asks, yet it stands as your silent oath to excellence. Occasionally, you introduce small innovations. A carved groove in the stool's rim catches drips before they stain the wood. A tiny notch in the basin stand channels excess water away neatly. You experiment with a new blend of chamomile and rose petals for a morning sachet, watching to see if the king's mood brightens at dawn. These tweaks reflect your deep understanding of the tool's potential, and your subtle influence on the chamber's atmosphere. You recall a day when one of the brushes splintered during service. The king hissed in discomfort. And for a tense moment, you feared you'd lost his favor. You repaired and reinforced 3 new brushes overnight, presenting them at dawn with a humble apology and the promise of uninterrupted comfort. The king's only response was a relieved sigh and a nod, proof that your tools matter as much as your discretion. As you finish your inspection, the tools rest again in their orderly array, ready for the next call. You stand back and take it all in, the polished stool, the gleaming basin, the fragrant bottles, and the silent signet. These objects might seem unassuming, but they embody centuries of tradition, innovation, and unwavering care. You steady your breathing, ready for the next intimate service. In your hands, these implements become more than tools, they become instruments of trust, vessels of dignity, and silent testaments to the groom of the stool's unique blend of practical skill and discreet influence. You cross the castle's great courtyard, the midday sun warming the pale stones as you make your way toward familiar territory, the privy chamber. Yet today, your mind drifts beyond these walls, imagining how fellow grooms of the stool, or their continental counterparts, navigate similar duties in France, Spain, and the sprawling Holy Roman Empire. In each realm, the office takes on a different flavor, shaped by local customs, court hierarchies, and even regional sense. In France, you'd step into a grander, more perfumed chamber serving Louis XIII or XIV. The French valet de chambre holds a role akin to yours, but with less emphasis on unspoken power and more on elaborate ceremony. Their toilette ritual can stretch for hours, with attendants helping the king dress, groom his hair, and apply scented pomades. The privy itself might double as a dressing room, its wooden stool replaced by a carved marble basin with gold inlays. Here, you'd need a keen appreciation for courtly elegance, ensuring each scented sachet aligns with the latest Parisian fashion, perhaps rose absolu one day, or a daring mix of lavender and bergamot the next. In contrast, the Spanish court under Philip II offers a more somber approach. You'd enter a dimly lit alcove lined with dark cedar panels, chosen to absorb moisture and mask odors. Spanish grooms of the stool, often drawn from Hidalgo families, serve not only as privy attendants but also as keepers of the king's confessional secrets. The privacy of the orinal room doubles as a space for hushed spiritual counsel, with penitential murmurs weaving through the scent of sandalwood incense. Your role there would demand both physical care and spiritual discretion, guiding the monarch through moments of personal doubt as skillfully as you scrub the stool's rim. Travel eastward into the Holy Roman Empire, and you find a patchwork of princely courts, each with unique variations. In Vienna, under the Habsburgs, the Kammer might share duties across toiletry, wardrobe, and even diplomatic errands. The imperial privy, often housed in a side tower, boasts a stone seat over a stone chute, no wooden stool here, and your tools would include sturdy iron brushes rather than delicate linens. Yet, the Habsburg standard of discretion remains high. The Kammer is expected to keep imperial secrets as tightly as he seals sulfuric springs used for wash water. Meanwhile, in the Palatinate or Saxony, you'd serve electors whose courts prize efficiency over ceremony. Their privy chambers are austere, plain wood, simple brass basins, and crates of fresh straw rather than embroidered cushions. Yet even here, the groom's status can be elevated. You might receive a stipend paid in guild coins, granting you citizenship in the local artisans' guild and access to trade privileges. Your privileges vary, but your responsibilities, maintaining the sovereign's comfort and confidentiality, remain unmistakably alike. One breezy morning, you imagine crossing paths with a French valet, his powdered wig brushing the privy doorframe as he enters with a faint wave of violet-scented fans. You'd compare notes. He'd lament Parisian gossip that perfume trends change weekly. Leaving him scrambling for fresh imports, you'd share a wry grin, noting that at least royal bowels aren't subject to fickle fashion. He might chuckle and admit that the French chamber's marble basin squeaks at night, betraying the monarch's midnight visits. You'd counter with tales of your own drafty corridor and the nocturnal symphony of howling wind that rattles your tapestry, noisy enough to rival any court musician. Despite these differences, a shared ethos unites you all. Intimacy demands integrity. Whether you wield rosewater or sandalwood, marble or wood, your charge is the same: to serve the sovereign's most basic needs with dignity, humor, and unwavering discretion. You take pride in this transnational fraternity, bound not by borders but by the peculiar privilege of knowing a ruler's hidden moments. Occasionally, political alliances hinge on these parallels. A French valet once negotiated the loan of prized lavender fields for England's privy chambers, trading them for English wool for French tapestries. The arrangement passed through private channels, no formal envoy, relying instead on the mutual respect of two men in velvet gloves, each tending a monarch's backside. You'd have sanctioned such a barter, recognizing that scented oils could smooth more negotiations than any royal envoy. Back in Spain, a groom's spiritual confidences reportedly helped avert a religious crisis when Philip II hesitated to publish a controversial Inquisition decree. Whispers say the attendant gently reminded the king of his duty to justice, an intimate nudge that influenced the decree's phrasing and timing. Again, no fanfare, just the quiet counsel delivered beside a simple orinal bowl. You imagine nodding in approval at such discreet diplomacy, comparing it to your own whispered interventions back home, and in the empire's fragmented courts. You hear tales of electors' grooms coordinating with city councils to improve sewage systems, trading blueprints for safe passage through city gates. Their engineering feats emerged from the privy's practical needs. No king likes a clogged chute. You marvel at such ingenuity, reminded that your small tweaks, like adding grooves to channel water, fit into a broader tradition of using privy service to spark innovation. As you enter your own chamber and settle brushes and linens, you reflect on this mosaic of practice. In every court, the groom's or valet's role blends the mundane with the majestic, hygiene with hidden power, ceremony with sincere care. You are part of a lineage that spans kingdoms, each variant echoing the same paradox: to hold the sovereign's confidence, you must handle their most humble moments. You take a deep breath, inhaling your familiar fragrance of lavender and rosewater, comforted by the thought that, no matter where you serve, the art of privy attendance transcends borders. It's a role defined not by politics or protocol, but by the timeless human need for compassion and discretion, qualities that, from Paris to Madrid to Vienna, remain the groom's greatest tools. The soft clatter of a latrine door closing in a provincial manner catches your attention as you stroll past the castle's newer wing, plumbing innovation spreading through noble estates like whispers on the wind. It's a far cry from the privy chamber you know so well, with its humble wooden stool and scented sachets. In this, and many other gentle shifts, you see the seeds of your office's decline, as changing manners and technology begin to render the groom of the stool a quaint relic rather than a necessity. You remember the first time you encountered a chamber outfitted with early flushing mechanisms, a simple cistern on the wall, releasing a steady cascade of water when a cord was pulled. It felt startlingly modern, almost decadent, to have running water wash away what once required your careful brush strokes. The sound of rushing water, at first jarring in its unfamiliarity, soon became soothing, echoing your own ambient fan hum at home. Yet each flush lessened the king's reliance on your skills, just as the steady trickle of progress would eventually erode your station. Manners, too, were shifting. The Renaissance brought new sensibilities about privacy, screens, separate garderobe towers, and private wardrobes that insulated the monarch from servants' eyes. As nobles adopted these customs, the idea of sharing one's most intimate moments, even with a trusted groom, grew less palatable. You'd been the silent witness to it all, but now a polite distance was in vogue, turning your role from confidant to embarrassing anachronism. New court offices sprouted like mushrooms after rain. The chamberlain, once distant from such menial tasks, now oversaw personal care with teams of specialized servants, launderers for clothes, barbers for shaving, and a new privy chamber attendant who handled only the most basic duties, leaving true intimacy to others' memories. You found yourself supervising rather than serving, a quiet promotion in title but a demotion in purpose. Your gloves still cleaned the stool, but your counsel on state matters waned as protocol shifted authority to more formal offices. King after king embraced these changes. Under Elizabeth I, the installation of perfumed flues, wooden pipes channeling smoke from scented coals, reduced the need for linen sachets and fresh oils. Courtiers entered the chamber carrying small censers rather than relying on your hand-blended fragrances. The architecture itself, high ceilings, marble floors, and polished brass fixtures, created an atmosphere of sanitized sophistication that left little room for your fragrant craftsmanship. The 17th century saw the advent of private apartments with multiple closets. Each closet had its own rudimentary plumbing, a wooden chute buried in the outer wall leading to a courtyard cesspit. Maintenance crews replaced daily brush and cloth rituals with teams of laborers paid by the hour to empty and clean these new privies. You, the groom of the stool, became an esteemed historian of bygone practices. Called upon only when a stubborn clog demanded the old-fashioned touch. As the king's needs changed, so did court customs. Dinners moved to secluded galleries, where servants served sweetmeats and wine but never witnessed the royal relieve routine. This new etiquette prized invisibility. No servant, no attendant, and certainly no groom, would intrude upon a monarch's solitude. You found yourself relegated to ceremonial duties, opening palace gates at sunrise or lighting chamber fires at dusk, tasks far removed from the stool but still within the sphere of personal service. Even your training methods felt obsolete. The apprentice you once mentored in the art of linen folding and oil blending now studied plumbing diagrams and pipe maintenance alongside the castle's engineer. His lessons centered on mechanical valves and will-operated sluices rather than secret oaths and whispered confidences. You watched him master these new skills, understanding that practicality had finally outpaced privacy in the corridors of power. The decline was subtle at first, an extra attendant by the throne one day, a newly installed pump the next. Then came the official abolishment of your title, a royal decree folding the groom of the stool's duties into the office of the chamberlain. With honor and retrospection, the decree read, but with no need for further hands upon the stool. It was a gentle end, signed with gratitude rather than shame, yet you felt the sting of obsolescence prick your pride. In the years that followed, you found yourself consulting on historical protocol rather than practicing it. Often, scholars and visitors would peer into the old privy chamber, marveling at its simplicity and scent vials. They'd ask you to reproduce the ancient rituals for demonstration, turning your once vital craft into a museum exhibit. You obliged, careful to retain every whisper of authenticity, yet you felt the divide between memory and reality, between what the office once was and what it had become. By the dawn of the 18th century, the term groom of the stool was as dusty as the scrolls that recorded its duties. New offices and new technologies had woven layers of distance between monarch and servant, carving out privacy through pipes, screens, and protocol. Your tools gathered patina, your signet ring slipped from daily wear to display in a curio cabinet. Yet in quiet moments, you still sensed the echo of those intimate confidences, soft words shared in scented air, the gentle rhythm of brush against wood, the hush that once bridged servant and sovereign. As you walk past the privy chamber now, its door sealed, its stool moved to the tapestry room, you smile softly. The world changed, manners evolved, and technology marched on. But the essence of your office endures in memory, a testament to an age when the most humble service could carry the weight of kingdoms, and when a simple wooden stool was the seat of power. You push open the tapestry-lined corridor one last time, the muffled hush of the privy chamber still clinging to the walls like a soft cloak. Today, you're not here to serve but to seek echoes of your once crucial role resonating through modern life, subtle threads of the groom of the stool woven into language, literature, and even lingering legal quirks. Take a deep breath of that lavender rose scent lingering in the air, and let's wander the halls of history's afterlife. First, there's language, the most unexpected place to find trace relics of your office. You've probably heard someone say, "Mind your own business," or "butt in," without a second thought. Those casual phrases owe their existence to the discreet boundaries once observed in royal bathrooms. When medieval courtiers learned that physical privacy underpinned political protocol, they coined euphemisms to keep conversations polite. Over time, "mind your own business" drifted into everyday speech, a distant echo of the respect demanded when a groom stood guard during the king's most private moments. Next time you tell someone to butt out, remember you're channeling centuries of royal etiquette. Literature, too, captures faint reflections of your station. In Shakespeare's histories, characters often confide in a keeper or valet, their innermost schemes whispered not to a general servant but to someone akin to your medieval counterpart. Think of Falstaff's conspiracies or Richard III's soliloquies. Those private asides might have been staged beside a privy rather than on a grand stage. Some scholars argue that these dramatic confidants owe their role to the real-life grooms who mastered the art of listening without judgment. When Shakespeare wrote, he was tapping into a cultural memory of intimacy built on trust and wood, which is perhaps less romantic than he'd like, but infinitely more human. You might also spot your influence in unexpected legal vestiges. Believe it or not, certain English statutes forbade anyone but the groom of the stool from touching the royal garments or privy implements. Though these laws have long since fallen into obscurity, a handful remain buried in the archives, cited occasionally in legal history journals as examples of sacred servitude. Imagine a modern lawyer dusting off a 16th-century decree to argue that only an appointed officer may adjust the Queen's throne. For comedic effect, of course. These archaic statutes remind us how seriously medieval courts guarded the line between servant and sovereign. Fashion, too, bears faint imprints of your legacy. The detachable codpiece, once a practical covering for the privy moments you oversaw, evolved into a flamboyant status symbol in the 1500s and 1600s. As a groom, you'd helped fasten these pouches each morning, ensuring the monarch's modesty, and yet, centuries later, codpieces became ornate proclamations of virility. It's a cheeky twist, what began as a simple cloth flap to hide a gentleman's business became runway fashion for Elizabethan courtiers. Turning to literature again, you find faint tributes in memoirs and diaries. Victorian writers occasionally reference privy confessions as metaphors for unburdening secrets, an allusion to the confidences once shared in scented chambers. When a 19th-century noblewoman journals about confiding in my chambermaid at midnight, she's borrowing imagery from an age when that chambermaid was literally perched beside a stool of state. These echoes reveal how the groom's intimacy transformed into universal symbols of trust and storytelling. Perhaps the quietest echoes come in so-called privacy laws. Modern notions of attorney-client privilege, doctor-patient confidentiality, and even psychologist-patient secrecy owe conceptual roots to medieval court discretion. The groom of the stool was bound by an unbreakable oath: whatever he heard in the privy stayed in the privy. Over centuries, this principle expanded into broader legal protections. When you pause to consider that your humble oath helped inspire foundational ideas of confidentiality, you can't help but swell with pride, quietly, of course, in true groom fashion. In popular culture, the groom of the stool makes cameo appearances in historical novels and television dramas, often played for comic relief or quirky trivia. But beyond the laughs, these portrayals remind us of an enduring fascination with bodily rituals and the power dynamics they reveal. You've seen characters fumble with toilet brushes on screen, accompanied by nervous strings in the score, and homage, however clumsy, to your real-life choreography of brush, water, and linen. Even in architecture, echoes emerge. Some stately homes converted their old privy chambers into reading nooks or wine cellars, spaces once dedicated to elimination now repurposed for leisure. The heavy oak doors remain, upright like silent sentinels marking a threshold between public grandeur and private sanctuary. In these repurposed rooms, you can almost hear the faint clinking of wine glasses mixed with distant whispers of linen brushing wood, a subtle reminder of the room's layered history. If you listen to the soft hum of podcast footnotes or follow niche history blogs, you'll stumble upon devoted enthusiasts dissecting the groom's wardrobe, the precise recipes for royal scented oils, and oddball trivia like the king's preference for horsehair cushions. These micro-communities keep your legacy alive in digital ether, preserving the details of your chamber rituals for curious minds worldwide. It's fitting, an office built on whispers now thrives in online whispers. In the final analysis, your modern echoes might be hidden in plain sight, tucked into everyday language, legal concepts, and cultural imaginations. They're as subtle as a lavender sachet's gentle aroma, yet as persistent as the royal lineage they once served. You may no longer kneel behind a wooden stool, but your influence endures in our understanding of privacy, trust, and the curious ways power rests upon the most ordinary acts. You rise, placing a final spritz of rosewater on the disused stool, and take a moment to appreciate the tapestry of echoes you've uncovered. From codpieces to client privilege, from Shakespearean confidants to podcast fanatics, the groom's legacy ripples through time, an unassuming testament to the power of humble service. You exit the chamber, leaving behind the soft scent of history. And though your tools gather dust, your echoes continue to shape the world, one whispered word, one scented breath, one quiet act of trust at a time. You push open the privy chamber door one final time, the familiar scent of lavender and rosewater greeting you like an old friend. The wooden stool stands patiently in its place, its linen cover freshly laundered, as though ready for one more service. You pause at the threshold, taking in the chamber's quiet glow, the flicker of the stove's embers, the polished basin, the line of tools awaiting your touch. This room has been your stage, your sanctuary, and your confessional, and now it feels as though you're closing a book you've lived every page of, from your first hesitant steps behind the stool, when your heart raced at the thought of kneeling before a monarch's most private moments, to now, where each movement is as natural as breathing. Your journey has been one of paradox, humble service married to profound trust. You've discovered that power often hides in simple acts, smoothing a linen cloth, offering a drop of scented oil, lending an ear to a weary king. You've learned that the hush of the privy holds more weight than thunderous proclamations in the Great Hall. In these 15 sections, you've traced the office's origins in early monarchies and witnessed its formalization under the Tudors. You felt the chamber's anatomy come alive, the creak of floorboards, the warmth of the stove, the secret language of sighs and coughs. You followed your daily rituals, where each brush stroke anchored you in a world both ritualized and deeply human. You explored the intimacy shaping a crown's inner workings, and you assessed the training that selected discreet apprentices from among wide-eyed boys. You navigated the paradoxical social status that combined menial tasks with noble access, met the colorful grooms who rose and fell by virtue of proximity, and uncovered how whispered words in the privy rippled through politics and policy. You encountered the scandals, missing letters, tainted remedies, cursed fragrances, that threatened to undo the office's delicate trust and spurred scholars' debates over whether the groom wielded true power or functioned as a symbolic confidant. You examined the instruments of your trade, brushes, basins, oils, and your signet ring, and marveled at how each tool became an instrument of comfort and discretion. You journeyed through French marble privies and Spanish cedar alcoves, through Habsburg iron brushes and austere Saxon chambers, discovering a shared fraternity across courts. You witnessed the office's decline as plumbing, privacy norms, and new offices replaced your duties, yet you held fast to the belief that the essence of your station endures in memory. Finally, you spotted modern echoes, from everyday idioms like mind your own business, to Shakespearean confidants, to the roots of privacy laws in your unbreakable oath. You saw how codpieces evolved from functional coverings to flamboyant fashion, how podcast footnotes and history blogs keep your legacy alive, and how architecture repurposed your chamber into reading nooks and wine cellars. These traces remind you that humble service can shape language, law, and culture in subtle but enduring ways. Historians still argue whether the Groom of the Stool's influence was a practical force driving policy or merely a symbolic intimacy that stirred gossip rather than genuine decisions. Some insist your whispered intercessions were the kingdom's secret engine, others contend the Groom remained a silent servant, never crossing the threshold into real power. As you gaze at the stool one last time, you realize the truth may lie somewhere in between, power shared in the margins, where what meets linen and silence speaks louder than any royal decree. You step forward and run your palm along the stool's edge, feeling the smooth grain beneath your glove. The moment feels sacred, the threshold between service and reflection. You lower yourself to one knee, bowing your head in gratitude for the trust you've held and the stories you've witnessed. You rise slowly, mind and body aligned in the understanding that this chamber, this office, and this ritual have shaped you as much as you shaped them. Now, before you step away forever, you allow your heart to soften, your pace to slow, and your thoughts to drift toward rest. The journey has been vivid, sometimes startling, always intimate. But it's time to let the hush of memory cradle you, to let the echoes of whispered confidences fade into gentle dreams. Lean back and notice the soft rise and fall of your breath. Imagine the lavender sachets releasing a final, calming swirl of fragrance around you. Feel the warmth of the stone beneath your knee as you recline against the chamber's threshold. There's no need to rush, let the moment stretch like the last rays of sunset across ancient tapestries. Remember the creak of the stool, the flicker of candlelight, the quiet hush that enveloped every service. These details, once vivid, now drift like wisps of smoke, gentle and insubstantial. Allow them to dissolve into your mind, leaving behind only a tender comfort. The chamber's air is still scented, still warm. Carry that sensation with you as you settle under your covers. Your journey from awkward first service to master of intimate counsel is complete. Release any remaining tension in your shoulders and let your eyelids grow heavy. The world outside this chamber fades, replaced by a soft symphony of quiet wood, scented waters, and whispered trust. As you drift, know that this story, strange and soothing, has honored the hidden rhythms of history. Your service may have ended, but its echoes live on in gentle words and calm breaths. Let the privy's hush guide you deeper into rest, where each inhale is a lantern lighting your dreams, and so, with a final sigh, surrender to sleep's embrace. Sweet dreams, dear listener.